welcome to Defen, episode number 66. So we just pivoted as a gaming podcast to attract the younger audience. And we'll probably be on twitching. We are twitching severely now. Is it Twitch? Whatever the thing that that young people are into? All the hipsters?
Yeah.
Or OnlyFans? We're on OnlyFans. Or Twitch. So this is episode number 66.
We should, by the way, replace Defan with just a TikTok, like 55 TikToks.
Yeah, and then we do the dance thingy.
Hey,
what's that? TikTok dance or whatever? I think.
Yeah.
I
Whatever. Yeah. I can't
think
do
people. We can't subtitle what Ray is doing, so I think we're going to refrain from it. We'll save you, the people who are listening in right now. So this is episode number 66, and welcome to
It's
Defen,
one
Dominic.
short of the devil, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So here he comes.
That actually works because I was born on Friday the 13th.
Oh, right. Okay.
Perfect.
And this is a total horror show. So
maybe we'll just skip like Java, just skip bunch of versions like Windows, and then just say this is 666 episode number.
Yes.
And then internet will be frantically looking for all the missing episodes. Like, what are those things? Create some mystery around it. Maybe that will be a good thing. So, welcome to Defen, episode number 666 with Dominic. Welcome. So, let's get started.
Sorry, yeah. There was a pause there, and I was like, "Wait, I should probably say, oh, thanks for having me," and or something.
Okay, that's all for today from episode number 666. So,
I think
Dominic,
we should rename you Damien for the episode. It's pretty close.
Dominic, yeah. So, maybe introduce yourself.
I'm Dominic.
Right, remember, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel here. So.
Yeah. I mean, we're at episode 666.
It's the end.
We're at the bottom of the list. It's
some bloke we randomly pulled off the street. Didn't I tell you that? I met him at Clojure tray, last year, and I was drunk, he was drunk.
Well, despite my behavior, I was not drunk. I don't drink. I was on medication when I was a teenager, which prevented me from drinking, so I never started. So then I never felt the reason to. So now I don't have it as like a vice that I reach on when I'm stressed or
or an excuse for your idiocy. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
No, very healthy, very good. Yeah. I've stopped drinking myself, actually. I had October, and now I'm doing November. We'll have to see how December works out, but yeah, it's pretty good to be off the sauce, to be honest.
What is December then? Decreased Ember, or?
Oh, I like that one. Yeah. Decrease Ember. Yeah.
Mountain Spark.
Ember. Yeah.
And then January is just enough January, and then fuck it, February, back online.
Fuck it, February.
Yeah, exactly. Screw this, I'm back. And you catch up with all the pending booze.
I worked with someone once who had drinking days scheduled on his calendar. But what became very clear was that those were days that he had to drink, and the other days were optional.
I remember some joke like that. There is a guy who used to come to the pub or a bar, and then every day he has like 2 glasses of beer, and then one in front of him and one the other side of the table, and then he drinks every day. And then the bartender asks, "Why do you do this?" Like, "Oh, because I used to have a good friend, and then he used to drink with me, so in memory of him, I'm drinking." And then after some days, he only has like 1 glass of beer, and then he asks, "What happened to your friend?" He said, "Oh, my friend. This is my friend. I actually stopped drinking." So he gave up drinking. So I think it sounds like that, optional days and then have to drink days. Anyway, so that's the beer and then games. So how is the weather like? So you're from the UK.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we're getting desperate now. We're getting into the weather straight away.
And why
Sorry, Dominic.
avoiding any Clojure related topics.
I mean, Jesus. You know what the weather's doing here? It's grey and miserable, and it keeps spitting down on me. Yeah.
So on that high note,
to be honest,
sort of non-controversial. Epic.
Brexit's going a little bit too well, actually. It's a bit annoying. So I get paid in dollars. So when Britain does poorly, I get paid more because I strategically convert to pounds when the pound isn't worth as much. And because we're so close to a deal, people are like feeling like it's going to happen, so that they've got a bit more confidence in the pound. I mean, it doesn't help that people are very worried about the US right now. So the dollar is plummeting. And we're not quite managing to kill ourselves as quickly. So now I'm a bit out of pocket.
It's a bit of a knacker for me, actually, because I get paid in dollars as well. And the euro versus the dollar is really fucked, So I've had a big haircut recently, So Donald Trump's rated my performance and decided it's not good enough.
Then why don't you switch to getting paid in cryptocurrencies, like Dogecoin or something?
So much less volatile.
Exactly. They're going to be like flatline exchange rates. So that's going to be amazing. Always paid in I don't know, 2 bags of salt or whatever. Anyway, so speaking of money and work, so how did you get into Clojure, Dominic?
There's this great little group down in Exeter, which is in the southwest of England. And I moved there. My partner's family is from Exeter. So we moved there for the summer, and I was like, okay, there's this Clojure group. I lived in Wales prior to that, and there is no tech groups. Like, people look at you funny if you say that you touch computers. So I lived in the southwest for a little while, and there's this Clojure group, and I was just like, it's a chance to hang out with like technical people, so I'm going to rock up. And they were just really welcoming and just very, I don't know, they sold me on Clojure. So I went away for the month between the two meetups and played around with this. I hooked up Minecraft to Clojure. I set up a REPL inside of Minecraft, and I went back the next month and I was like, look how much cool stuff I've been doing. And at the time I was a freelancer, so the next job I got, I did in Clojure. So that was how I started playing around, and I started building out this full web application. And I was sort of enthralled by the dream of Lisp, because they had all this complex like they wanted to integrate with other systems, but they wanted a uniform UI throughout. And I was like, I'm going to just like build up this DSL in Clojure, and it's going to be all lispy and hiccupy, and I'm just going to output the different template formats automatically. It's going to be so awesome.
Was it?
Well, I didn't get to that point in the project, unfortunately. They had
oh, that's a shame.
They had an internal change of mind and decided to do the project internally in Java instead.
Oh, Jesus!
Yeah, I know. They were a Minecraft company, so they already had plenty of Java people on hand. I don't know if they had any like Spring Boot people. I don't know how they were planning on doing the web part of that Java stuff, because doing Minecraft plugins where you're essentially designing games and doing like processing of events as they fly in is quite different to web programming. So I don't think I ever checked in on how they managed to get on. I was busy. So after that, I met Malcolm at what's the name of the Skills Matter conference in London?
ClojureX.
Yes, that's it. I met Malcolm at ClojureX. That was in 2016. Maybe
Malcolm Sparks.
Yeah, Malcolm Sparks.
Malcolm X.
And he was armed to the teeth.
With parentheses.
Yes.
Like throwing them like, what are those things? Like shuriken things. Yeah.
I met him, and we talked a bit about Biddy, because I'd used Biddy on that project prior to that. And I made some open source contributions to Biddy, and not much later I got an email in my inbox saying, hey, would you like to come work at Juxt? So I said yes.
Nice. But before coming to Clojure, what were you working on?
So I started programming in C. That was what I started learning. I was really interested in security. Mm-hmm. So C was the natural language to play around with. I mean, I'm from a background where we shun C++. Like C++ is too complicated. You can't go low level enough.
Totally agree.
You just don't understand the assembly code anymore. And Java's the devil. Like that is so heavyweight and just like so bloated and such a, why would you even bother? So that was sort of, I got my start in C, but then to pay the bills, I started web programming. So I picked up Python and did quite a bit with Django and Pyramid and Flask and all that sort of stuff. And then I was doing web programming at the birth of React. I remember the early days of React, and it's quite odd coming to ClojureScript actually, because it's like, wait, but how do I, like, where's my component did mount? Like it's gone. Like I've lost it. And like, what is this reagent thing, and how does it actually manage to pull this off?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so a bit of Python, bit of JavaScript, bit of C, and probably a bunch of other little miscellaneous
things. So what was the domain for C where you were so hardcore? Was it like embedded programming?
No, it was security. So when you're writing exploits and stuff like that, it's a lot easier to do it in C when you can bit fiddle and just jump into this other part of the program intentionally because I want to.
Were you trying to attack C programs then? Because you could do buffer overruns or like things like that.
Yeah, some of that. And some of it was just learning. Some of it was just I wanted to understand how buffer overflows worked in the first place. Like I didn't understand the model that led you to them, which I now do like very clearly in my mind. So learning security first was actually a really impactful thing. I have often been, wherever I'm working, the voice of security. I'm like, I have a little radar in my head now, which is like, that looks fishy. Like something's off in that area. You need to like validate that or like something.
But that's
the thing that's most annoying to me about security at our company is everyone's always like, "Oh, do this, do that, don't do this. You could be DDoS. You could be DDoS. You could be DDoS. You could be DDoS. You could fuck DDoS. Jesus Christ! Yeah.
I think
don't use Clojure. You could be DDoS. No, shut up.
The scary one for Clojure is actually DOS rather than DDoS. So my favorite example of this is Spec. To this day, I have discouraged everyone I've met from hooking up Spec to a web endpoint. So I'm possibly about to sort of reveal an exploit in your application if you're listening. So there's two things that factor into this exploit. One is that the open world assumption of Spec. So any key that you send to the server will be validated. I know there's things like Spec Tools by Bentosin, and they do all sorts of funky stuff by illegally using the protocols and whatever, but officially
illegal. Very
it is. I mean, Alex Miller told them off. Alex was like,
doesn't get any worse than that.
No, exactly.
It's
right?
like Bob Ross saying your painting is wrong.
Like that's a bit of a low standard, right? It's not like Bob Ross is known like Michelangelo or something. He's just a dude who paints mountains and trees. And I think we offended Bob Ross fans of the internet. So moving on. Who's next?
So there's this open world assumption that every key that comes in will be validated. So if there's a library, let's say, for example, it validates a string and it takes 500 milliseconds per character because it's doing some kind of, cryptographic verification. I can send you that key and string of like 4,000 characters that it was never intended to be used with, and it will validate it. And that will make your server very, very busy. So now instead of needing like a botnet army of 5 billion computers to take down your server, I need one server, one client, like one bot, and I can take down your whole service because I'll just completely destroy the CPU cycles.
Yeah. So please use Spec. That's what you mean, right?
Well, it's an alpha, so you shouldn't use alpha software.
Hey, this is episode 666, so we need to bring down people. It's like the Emperor's New Groove. Oh no, I think he got a point. Like Kronk from Emperor's New Groove. Like, wait a minute, I think he got a point. But I don't think many people will use Spec in the so-called production code, right? I mean, usually disable those validations in production anyway.
You'd be surprised.
Okay. I haven't seen, but yeah.
People hook it up to web endpoints, so they use it as the validation to confirm that what's coming in is valid. And presumably
I think it's a very common use case. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if you're calling like keyword on it, if you have the slash in it, so I could modify a form to submit, my.slow.namespace spec/foo, and it'll if you call keyword on that, it'll get processed, and then spec will pick it up. So
yeah. Well, I guess they think, as you said, don't use alpha software, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think
or alpha 2 software,
Well, the other thing is spec 1 intentionally wasn't covering this use case, right? I evaluated it when it first came out, and I got told off for being a very negative Nelly, which is a very common thing. I'm often told that I'm just too much of a downer on everything. It's like, but it's like, yeah, I'll quickly pick out the flaws in anything. But I evaluated it early on.
Why did we invite him on here?
Because it's the final episode.
And Clojure's terrible, like rubbish.
I mean, Rich Hickey is not saying yes, so we gotta settle for this guy.
Yeah, that's right.
It's either him or Dominic. So yeah.
Anyway, but I think you make a very good point there, Dominic, that like security is definitely an issue, and like you say, you have to be careful out there, because I think you can probably combine these things with multiple variations so that it's not your only line of defense. But and often these things are not necessarily like latency critical, and you also know the clients, for example. So you can be a bit more if they're signing things and stuff like this, So you can put other kind of restrictions in place that make it a bit more tricky to form those DDoS attacks.
I was having some argument not argument, but kind of a discussion at one of the work projects. Again, the whole discussion of whether Clojure requires a framework like Django or Phoenix or something like that. But isn't it then, in that case, security point of view, better to have like a coherent coherent framework where you can, essentially make sure that all the libraries that you're using are vetted, validated. Don't you think it makes it easier compared to people picking random libraries and then plugging them together and then hoping it's going to work? Security wise,
the biggest surface area you really have, in most applications, is usually database injection.
Yeah.
Right. And to be honest, Clojure's story here is the best non-ORM story I've really seen. Right. The pattern of parameterized queries is very strongly encouraged by the libraries, even by the underlying Java system. It's just so strongly pushed, and you can do almost everything that you would want to do with that. So I haven't seen a lot of evidence that it's been a problem on that sort of aspect, like from an execution, buffer overflow, that sort of the serious exploits. I haven't seen too much evidence that that's actually a problem in Clojure. I can't think, because Ring does a good job of all the parsing. So between Ring and Java JDBC, or obviously if you're not using SQL, then you're using Mongo, and then you've got to follow whatever their rules are around injection and parameterization. I don't know what they are. But to be fair, where I've actually seen this fall down a little bit was with Datomic queries, where people didn't realize it was parameterizable because they'd already put the backtick around it. So they couldn't figure out how to like put symbols in. So they started doing like manipulation of it and like injecting stuff in. And I was like, okay, I'm going to send you some random Eden and let's see what happens. Because you can execute stuff in Datomic queries. You can say like, run thread sleep 10,000 and just lock it up.
Yeah. But I think this is something that I've been thinking about it, because I remember, I think a few years ago at ClojureConf, there was a talk by one of the folks. I don't know who. I don't remember the names. Specifically talking about web security.
I remember
and like a weird situation that Clojure is in for the web security because of this. We have this buddy and then friend and a lot of other libraries, and not having like a consistent view on the security side, for at least for the web development in Clojure.
Actually, I'm gonna use this as an opportunity to talk about something that's been on my mind recently, which is that I think that Clojure doesn't need a framework. I think frameworks just don't fit what people use Clojure for. Like if we were going to be another Rails or another, I've got to say this properly because I'm on the air now. Laravel. I always say it like Laravel or something like that. I always get it wrong. Anyway, like if we were going to be another one of those, yeah, Laravel. I think it's named after some person, so you have to pronounce it how the person's last name sounds or something. I don't know. Anyway, if we're going to be another one of them, like there's no point competing in that market. It's already completely dominated, right? People come to Clojure because they want to piece stuff together, right? They want to use MongoDB and do a web application. You know, good luck doing that with Rails because you're tied into the ORM, and people like the ORM. It's great, and you know whatever. But so I actually don't think a web framework is the right way to go for Clojure. But what I do think would be useful is for more companies to come out and say, like, this is our stack. This is a set of libraries that you should use, right? Like, you don't have to, you know, we've tried this out on 20 projects or whatever, and like, just use it, right? No arguing. Yeah. Unless you run into a problem which you can't overcome, just use these libraries. We're happy with them.
Yeah. Like the full crow style.
I'm maybe not full crow. I always struggle.
And
to
I'm not saying full crow per
sits.
se, but that kind of concept.
I guess full crow is still a framework, right? I mean, it's still the whole.
I don't know.
I mean, they say that, but I mean, you know, his argument is, I mean, he was on here, VJ. Remember, he was saying that mostly it's just like a curated selection of libraries. You know, there is some frameworky parts to it, but it's mostly just a sort of collection of libraries.
Yeah,
I've always struggled to place full crow, like, because it seems like some moments it seems like it's just a client library that's like deeply integrated with Reagent or something like that. I've already forgotten whether they provide a React front end or not. And then sometimes people refer to it as if like a full stack competitor with, you know, like talking about database stuff with it. I've struggled to figure out what it actually is.
I think it's full.
Right.
That's why it says full crow. So it's full stack.
I always think of Velcro for some reason.
at VJ, okay.
Yes, I look forward to your tweets and muting them. As you can see, I'm super active on Twitter, so please send us your letters
or death threats to VJ.
Yeah. Please write. Write to the editors.
I think in terms of like framework or like let's say a list of libraries, I think people like Matosin and Juxt do that, which is quite good. But you know, what do you think? Because I think one of the issues, I guess, is that, you know, they might say that, but what are they doing in terms of like supporting it or standing behind it or certifying it? Or you don't want to be on a hook for that to some extent. You want to say this sort of stuff works, it's effective for us, but we're not necessarily going to like look after you for the long term. What is the goal, I guess, you know? But what's in it for everyone? You know, both sides of that.
That's a really interesting question, actually. I mean, I can talk about it from the consultant's perspective, being an ex-Juxter myself. So I can actually talk about, I worked a lot on Edge. That was a big project for me. It became a passion project that I worked on the weekends. So for Edge, the motivation was really that consultants start more projects than anyone else. This was like a really like the moment for me when I was working like when I was trying to sell when I was trying to sell Edge, I was trying to convince people like, hey, why aren't you using Edge? Let's talk about it. So, you know, I'm not starting any projects, and I started this one 2 years ago, and I just don't care. I was like, oh yeah, like I work at a consultancy. We start a new project every couple of months. So like having something I can update, having a dev system that's all nice and refined that I keep pulling in, that's actually really valuable. It's not as valuable when you're working on like a single project for 5 years. It doesn't matter as much. So that's why a consultancy like puts this together. It just seems so immensely valuable to them, and they keep hearing this, oh, we need a framework. So it kind of like fits with what the community is asking for vaguely along. It runs along the lines of what they're doing. Juxt were a bit more supportive of Edge. Well, I don't mean to compare it to Talvi, which is Matosin's thing that's a little bit vaporware at the moment. It's a README with a list. But no, I mean, I actually think Talvi's really good. Just to be clear, I'm working on a thing that's based on Talvi actually, but Juxt wanted to support this because they offer training courses based on Edge as well. So there's a plethora of documentation. I spun up so many Windows VMs trying to get Edge, like making sure Edge worked on Windows so that training courses would work, and making sure it's very beginner friendly because of that. I'm writing documentation.
You've suffered for your art.
Yeah.
So how maybe it's because you keep talking about Edge, and then maybe it's better to give a quick intro of what that is, and how where is it in the Forester quadrants of Clojure frameworks, and compared to Luminous and all the stuff that we have, like bazillion libraries and everything.
So I think that it's pretty close to Duct in terms of its goals. So Duct, did you have James Reeves on Defen to talk about
a long time ago? Yeah.
I remember
when we were young.
One of the first guests. Yeah. This is when we were playing Minecraft, so that was a very long time ago.
So something he mentioned on that episode was that the way Duct was designed was to make it easy to update. And I think the compromise he made was that he would generate any of the what I would refer to as frameworky parts. So the part that reads in the config, slurps up your system, and then starts it, right? Like that tends to be what people make a framework out of, right? And you declaratively put it in your config.eden and type go somewhere, and it magically pulls it in and starts it up, and it's just whoosh, magic.
Yeah.
So Edge, but most of Duct is libraries. So you can update them, you can just bump the version, and it's all fine. Edge sort of tried to solve the same sort of problem where it wanted to be updatable, but the way we tackled the framework part was that instead of generating it as part of the template, we wanted it to be able to evolve it and improve it over time. Mm-hmm. But if people wanted to go modify it, we wanted that to be okay too. So the way we solved that was by having you git clone Edge. So you could modify it and then merge in origin again, and the frameworky part would update unless you'd made a conflicting change. So it was sort of on you then to then merge the two changes together, but you would essentially still be able to benefit from upstream improvements to the framework part of the code, but also be able to modify it yourself. So you had flexibility and updatability, whereas I'm going to get a meow again, aren't I? Duct generated the framework part so that you were on your own at that point. And that was something that was a design goal for Edge, was that we don't leave you on your own. Partially because
the marketing is meowish. These are the guys. They leave you on your own.
Well, I think it's also fine, right? Because there's downsides to the Edge approach too, which is that you end up with this Git history that you perhaps don't want, right? My name ends up as a contributor to your private repo.
That's the most annoying part when using source code. Like seeing your name.
Like I always have more lines of code contribute to the repo than you, because I've been doing. I've been hacking on your repo 5 years longer than you, so my name is there.
I think it's going to be amazing because the more people use Edge in the corporate environment, and then they give the bonuses based on number of lines. And who's this Dominic guy? We need to shovel money to him. Send the bonus for the Christmas to him because he's the biggest contributor to our project.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point where my name overtook Malcolm's, and I was very proud that I finally it's mine. I did sort of have to move around a bit of his code to take responsibility for it, but it worked out in the end.
A few renames here and there.
Yeah.
It's basically indent, commit.
The other part of Edge, though, is the stack. So it's using Yada, it's using Biddy, but that's just generated as part of the template. It's not really a thing. So you can use Edge and rip out the Jux libraries, and it still is useful, I think. But it was definitely there to promote Jux libraries.
Yeah. So it's more like a source code framework, if that is a thing, rather than, so there is no the migration and upgrade path for non-source code frameworks are going to be a bit different, I think. Then
just before we go into that for a second, now that you have, because I sort of I've just caught up with what you were talking about in terms of Git cloning, etc. Yeah. So you basically go to a company and you fork the repo into a private repo of the company, and then you're off and running. Okay, I get it now.
Exactly.
So now we've got better tech with deps.eden. we can avoid that completely, I guess, because you can just put a dependency on the Edge repo, and then you don't take any of that bullshit because, so is that what you would do now?
Well, I can tell you what I would do now because I'm working on.
Okay, do it. Tell me. So exciting.
Well, I actually, so I don't think you quite, unless you do the monorepo approach or something like that, you can't. You would have to sort of like subtree the frameworky part into your repo, and then you could manage using subtree or submodules or some kind of Git mechanism for like having a folder that is another repo, managing updates that way. So it's not quite as sort of, you can't just use local root because you might not want to make these contributions upstream. One of the things as a consultant, the joke was often, what are you going to do? Tell the client that you can't go to production because the framework won't let you. No, you're going to go modify the framework and you're going to get it to do what you want it to do. And on several occasions, I went and like fiddled with the system code to let it like, just read the config in and like do some modifications to the config before we pass it along so that it looks different to what it does, and it's fine. It's not my preference to have it there, but it's there and I could ship, right? I could go to production and the client was happy. So yeah, I mean, we built it around deps.eden at the time, even knowing that the local root stuff worked. Edge heavily relies on the local root stuff to use its internal libraries. So I think to have the upgradability, you just somehow need to have the library as part of your repo, whether you local root that yourself or not.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the mistakes we made in Edge was that we made too much be part of the repo. We made too much be local root. We should have moved the examples out. And many of the libraries I've since realized it was literally, I was on holiday for 3 weeks, and sort of towards the end of it, I was like, I had the hankering to do some open source. So I started like rewriting Edge using deps.eden. So it was like literally like, late night hacking was what pulled the whole thing together. So on review, it wasn't perfect first time, but we ran with it because it suited us. We didn't, it was our commit. So we didn't really care as a consultancy that we had more of our commits. In fact, our clients quite loved it. I've been so busy, right? I've been preparing for their project my whole life, apparently. So so what I would do now, what I've actually started to do, even today, I published one of these libraries today, would be to pull out more of the libraries into their own thing. So I did this morning, published juxt.ig, which is just integrant wrappers for a couple of the Juxt libraries. It's only 100 lines of code, maybe across 3 files, probably not even that. But it just means that it's on a separate release cycle. It's not part of your Git pull. And I would have made just the framework part be what you update somehow.
Right.
So what do you get when you clone Edge then? So you get, what components that you get?
You get a couple of libraries, which is sort of like Juxt stuff, and even little things like developer logging is a little library inside the lib folder. That one I'm a bit more like, maybe it's useful to have it there because it's another one of those things where it's like there's a logback.xml in there that is fine for 99% of the time, but sometimes you might have a very chatty library that you want to adjust from warn to info so that it shuts up during development. And like it's useful to be able to just say like, hey, I'm just going to modify this logback.xml, and like when you get pull, if there's been changes, it'll probably merge fine.
Yeah. Why do you have it like that rather than as a sort of project template, for example?
The reason is entirely for that updatability, because let's say we're consulting on, say, 5 projects at the same time. I mean, this particularly affected me. So at Juxt, I had the role of sweeper. So I would be on multiple projects at a time, and I was there to sort of like fix things and just like deal with stuff. So I would jump on a project and say, wait, why am I getting all these logs from this library? Like we solved this problem, and I would git pull and like I would merge in the latest Edge, and all the problems would go away, and I'd be very happy. So any bugs that I found recurring across multiple projects, I would then put into Edge so I didn't have to see them anymore. Because I got very frustrated before Edge having to fix the same bug in several places, especially when, after like the 4th project, you're like, you think you fixed it. So you're like, this must be the same bug again in a different way, and you don't go look for the obvious thing. And it just became very, very frustrating. But I think that's useful to the community as well, right? Why not be collecting all of these? Like TNS 45 has driven me absolutely nuts throughout my Clojure career, because so TNS 45 is a bug that was raised against tools namespace, where if you've compiled Clojure script and put it on the class path and then do a reset, it will reload the Clojure script source files, which is fine unless you have protocols in there, which will then reload the protocols, completely break your reset. And it's just like this annoying thing. And it makes it look like some particular library is broken, like Biddy, because Biddy uses protocols and it broke everything. So it was absolutely infuriating. And so then I've come up with a general purpose fix, stuck it in Edge, and I never saw that problem again. And it was wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, I like that you remember the Jira issue number. So
it's burned in my head. Like the number of times,
like you have a T-shirt that says, I have a workaround for TNS 45. Talk to me about TNS 45.
I mean, it was quite funny actually, because like when people would join projects where, like, we were on a customer that had their own tech team that were doing Clojure and they weren't using Edge, I would get messages from people, like from Juxters on the team saying, "Hey, I've run into this. Do you know what it is?" And I'd be like, "Fucking TNS 40 again. I told you to use Edge. This wouldn't have been a problem."
But so why Edge though? Because it sounds like you're constantly on the edge. It's not like a stable project.
Well, the original name was, I think, Leading Edge or Bleeding Edge.
Yeah.
But also
that's much worse, I think.
I think it's because it was a demonstration project to start with, so it would show you the latest in thinking. But after a while, it seemed more useful for it to be stable, actually, and for there to be an upgrade path and for it to be incremental and say, "Oh, okay, we're on this project. We would like to update it because we're now doing more work on it."
Funnily enough, I always think of Edge as just a demo project. So I was trained in the previous meaning. It's like dog training, It's like it's not what it is; it's what it's trained to be. I was trained to think of Edge as some sort of demo.
They've been reinforced.
Yeah, exactly.
It took me a long time to get admin privileges to actually change the description, so it no longer said example application. It was a battle.
Rude example.
Yeah.
So when you wear your security hat, how do you see Edge compared to other frameworks then?
I actually don't think so. That's the thing. Edge, the frameworks in Clojure don't have anything to say about the web, really. Right? Like Edge, Duct, Luminous, other than using a library, they're not a web framework. They're more of they're a template. They're a starting point. I am putting my seal of approval on this. And if you trust me as a company, or like you place some value in what I'm saying, then you'll use it. Or if you think if you're a maverick, or if you know what you're doing, then you'll probably go off and do your own thing anyway.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying before, that I didn't really expound on, which is companies should publish a stack. And I would like to see more companies publish a stack and say, "Hey, this is what we use. This works really well for us. This is why it works, and this is how we use them together."
Yeah. Yeah, I think it makes more sense for companies like Jext, because you have several projects, at least, like 10, at least 20, 30 projects. And you've been in the Clojure ecosystem long enough to see the evolution of different libraries, and you came up with nice libraries by yourselves and based on your experience. I think it makes more sense to quote unquote certify something, to say, okay, this is going to be this is our stack and it served as well. So use something similar.
And Clojure consultancies want to see Clojure adopted, because that means more work for them. So consultancies actually have a pretty good alignment here for publishing their stacks.
Yeah. So when you're not working on Edge, what else are you working on?
Wedge.
Yes.
So John Piver has
That's your new cryptocurrency, is it?
Exactly.
Well, I'm now that I don't work at Juxt anymore, I'm no longer constrained by the 4 letters. So I now have 5.
Freedom. Yeah.
To be honest, it's now got to the point where I've written documentation for it and stuff like that. So now I've decided I'm stuck with the name. I would like to do something from myth and legend or history or something subtly Anglo-Saxon. But screw it. I've picked Wedge now. I joked for a while. John Piver describes things as wanky versions of something else a lot. Who was someone I worked with at Juxt. So for a while it was Wanky Edge, while I was sort of hacking it together. And then Joanna Antonelli, who's a friend of mine, suggested maybe we should call it Was Edge instead. So so wedge is really just a distillation of the ideas from Edge, pulling out things like juxt.ig into a library, and then I'm publishing. One of the points was to try and separate the frameworky part from the stack selection. The idea being that I would like to see, a wedge Talvi, a wedge Juxt, a wedge, whatever company.
Yeah.
Maybe I should try and think of a consultancy and encourage them to publish their stack by name dropping them on the. I would love to see a wedge Nubank, a wedge Cognitect, a wedge
wedge Walmart.
Well, I actually think Nubank would have a really good use case for something like this, where they do lots of microservices internally. I'm sure they do have some kind of documented standard. It's like, this is how you start a Clojure web service. This is what library we use for all our RPC integrations, or whatever whatever the internal stack looks like.
Yeah.
Like, just vaguely standardize on it, and you can always rip out parts that don't work for you, but it's a good starting point that it works.
Yeah.
But so wedge is. Well, I sort of pulled apart. I sort of had to think about Edge and what were the free main. Well, not what were the free main. I didn't start with the free constraint. I started with what were the main problems that it was solving? How do I tease these apart? Because there's this wonderful quote in Rich Hickey that's always stuck with me, which is that when you pull something apart, you can put it together in novel and interesting ways. So you can change how it goes together, which I just think is sort of fascinated me with that's what simplicity is really about. So I was trying to sort of pull apart Edge, and I've spent many months and lots of writing trying to figure out what is Edge. And I sort of decided that it was basically three things. It was a beginner setup, so it pulled in dev niceties for beginners who have never used Clojure before and probably want dev niceties on hand because they haven't picked out their own yet. It was a sort of a collection of bug fixes and hacks around things like TNS45 and stuff like that.
It's got it in there.
That was my next question.
Front and center.
Does it fix TNS45?
It might be in the README. I mean, there's other.
So
it's a great way to describe that you don't care. You don't want to care about TNS45. I care because it's driven me fucking nuts. You don't want to have to care. You want to live your life not knowing what TNS45 is. So just let me take care of it for you.
I really wish we'd had you on episode 45. This would have been so good.
I think this entire README, what is wedge? TNS45? That's what it is.
There's other bug
fixes
and
documents on the YouTube sort of channel. Hashtag not TJ4. TNS45.
Not TNS45.
Yeah. Subscribe and below. No. TNS45. Anyway, sorry, Dominic. Yes, so
there's other bugs in there.
It's beginner friendly, and it's not TNS45.
There's other bugs in there as well. So
is it REPL friendly, Dominic?
It's very REPL friendly. I have a lovely hack in there that makes it so beautifully REPL friendly. So there's other bugs it fixes though. For example, if you jack in from Cider and you jack in and connect to Clojure script and Clojure at the same time, and both of those commands start your system in order to start the Clojure script. VJ will tell you. I don't know, but VJ will tell you. We have skipped the most important question of the podcast, but I'm sure we'll get to it.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Do we have to? Come on.
So, Emacs or some other shit?
Some other shit.
Fuck it. Well, I mean, it's not TNS45, so
you were conned there, mate. He played the long game.
But I am a contributor to Cider, so I think I get a few brownie points for that.
Of course.
Yeah.
But you're jacking in.
So you're jacking in.
It always sounds very sort of rude to me, or I don't know, sort of like a drug thing.
I guess it sounds a bit like like jacking into the cyber matrix or something like that.
The matrix, that's it. Yeah.
But it
will
actually
tell me,
run.
go on, you jack into the REPL.
And it will run these init scripts simultaneously, which means there's actually a race condition there. So one of the other things that one of the little things that Wedge has accumulated is locks in strategic places to stop you from getting these spurious jack-in error messages. That people occasionally encounter, and when they do in a beginner training course, it's very embarrassing to say, "Oh, kill it and start again," or even just frustrating because you've waited 10 seconds for your REPL to start and it's just blown up randomly. So it's just one of the many hacks that we've collected, so that's made its way into Wedge as well.
Yeah.
But there's even little nice things in there. Like, for example, I came up with this neat way where I will run CLJ Condo in the background to build up the cache if you have Condo installed, which means that when you're linting files, if you've already linted the class path, then Condo will give you warnings about like, oh, there's an arity error in this library usage, which I think is really cool and it's wonderful. But it can only do it if you've run it against class path and you've kept it up to date. So what I do whenever you start a JVM with Wedge on it, I would just fork out to Condo in the background and populate that cache. And I did nudge Mikhail a little bit and get him to add proper caching to Condo that's jar based, so that it doesn't take as long in the background. But just little things like that where I can improve a lot of people's lives by just putting this fix in one place. And I just think that's a very valuable thing for the community to start doing, which is like that's valuable to anyone using Condo. It's valuable to everyone, essentially. Not just because I assume everyone's using Condo, but because it doesn't degrade from building microservices or anything. It's just useful.
Yeah. So the usage of Wedge is pretty much similar to Edge then. So you clone the repo and then you start it? Or do you have a template? Or
So as part of the teasing out, I separated out all of the framework stuff into its own little bubble, so that as much as possible could be in a library form, which means you can update it and, more like Duct in that sense.
Okay.
The framework aspect is still there, and I haven't figured out, I'm thinking what we talked about earlier, essentially, Ray, which is that if you want to fork the system, you do a local root and you set up a Git subtree, and it's you keep it updated that way.
Yeah.
Or the other aspect is maybe I can keep it simple enough, or I can build an abstraction for building abstractions. Because you can solve any problem by adding another layer of indirection.
That's true.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
That is devil's advice.
You can have a high order abstraction.
So, I'm still going to evolve what the framework aspect looks like right now. Right now, it's a lot of loading common code from ugly places, and maybe you shouldn't copy that as an example, but it works for me.
Yeah.
It works on my machine.
So you're going to ship it as a Docker image now, are you? Is that the idea?
Exactly.
Is that your hint?
Yeah. You actually can't. Yeah, you have to use my Docker image, and you have to load code into it over the network. You have to use a socket REPL and send your code
to you. Hey, that's what cloud is, right? I mean, we just need to run our applications on your laptop.
And
this is the security guy speaking now. It must be fine.
Yeah.
The hosted service is coming later this year. It'll be $10 a month for
no, I'm sure it's just completely free, but it's using your machines and your AWS account to mine cryptocurrencies. It's no problem.
So it's going to be Wedge as service. Was.
Well, at least you wouldn't go for wedgie,
I think that'll be the next version of the of the framework.
The sarcastic version of the library there.
Exactly. This doesn't fix TNS45 and it gives you a wedge.
We've detected that TNS45 would be triggered, but we've decided to show you this warning instead.
Exactly. You're about to get bitten by TNS45 and then just keep flashing in the REPL.
So anyway, sorry. So yes. So it's beginner friendly. It's not TNS45. REPL friendly. Do tell more.
Yeah.
One lovely thing about it, and this is something I spend a little bit of time on, and I have a tendency, I'm very active in Slack, which means I nudge people to do stuff. I'm very lazy. I get other people to do the work so that I can do the minimal amount of work that I have to do. So I nudged Alex Miller and got AdLib free. So we're on to version 3 of the AdLib branch of Toolsteps Alpha, which allows you to dynamically load dependencies into your running JVM if you're using deps.eden.
That is good, by the way, because I talked about this on a while ago, and he was like, yeah, maybe he's one of these days. So you've nudged him. Oh, good man. Yeah. Yes. Well, kudos.
Well, we're on to AdLib 3. He still hasn't committed, but it's evolving. Okay. There was some pretty neat code in AdLib 3, actually, that, for example, you can actually search for repos and it will use, have you heard of the grep.app service?
No.
It will search for Clojure repos with a similar name on grep.app if it can't find it on Maven or in Clojures, and it will suggest a Git dependency to you based on an existing Clojure repo. Yes, if you search Cheshire, it'll find the GitHub Cheshire repo. I thought that was pretty cool, but I'm not using that. All I'm using is the dynamically add to class path stuff. So the beginner, one of the problems with the beginner friendly stuff is that it tends to bloat the class path. So you don't want it to be part of the main dependency, because you want to take that to production, or actually, if you've got your own set of what I would call a mise en place, so like scope capture might be part of your mise en place, or SpyScope, or HashP, or or Rebel, or one of the, a bajillion libraries that you've built up for your personal workflow. So I call this the wedge mise, which is it's a beginner friendly mise, and you can use it, and it prints out lots of messages and tells you how to use it as you go along. And what it does is it actually dynamically loads the dependencies it needs. So it will fetch HashP, SpyScope, and a couple of other things on the fly. So you don't bloat your class path out. You just have to have this ad-lib free during development. I even have Rebel in there, conditionally loaded. So you can start the Rebel main without having a dependency on Rebel in your project.
Nice.
Yeah. I can even then do closing.
These are nice innovations, actually. I think I mean, this is, to me, these kind of things are the heart of what Clojure should be becoming. This whole Git dependency thing is epic, and now having this kind of stuff where you can dynamically load libraries, this is where we can get away from this Java shit, basically, with all this kind of like fixed class path stuff. So it's really a really fantastic innovation. Yeah,
you can you know how like everything is a monkey patch in Ruby. I worked with a Ruby guy once who this has been burned into my score, and I wish I could forget it. So I'm going to share it with you all and burn it into your scores forever. He showed me
TNS 73.
He showed me this wonderful library for Ruby that would hook into the require system. And if you required something and it couldn't find it, it would go onto Stack
Ruby
Overflow
Gems,
and find a matching function
God.
Evaluate it. So that like you could just like dynamically load stuff into your router. Like you just call the function and it would try and find it and make it exist.
Did it at least go for accepted answers? Yeah. Because that would be at least some quality there.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually it is going to be like that, right? Because I think most of the coding these days is copy-pasting from Stack Overflow anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that was the point, right?
Exactly. It's just going to get it from... The entire program will be built around Stack Overflow. You just keep typing questions like, how do I do this? And then one patch comes in from Stack Overflow. And then, how do I do this now? Another patch shows up. I think it's like programs writing programs, and then we don't need to do anything. You just will the function into existence. That's it.
No, but generally, this is really nice. I'm impressed by that. That's something which I think if we can democratize those kind of things, all the better. This kind of stuff. Because I was doing something very similar. I do something similar for this like multi-REPL thing that I use on the apropos. So and it's very nice to be able to just say, okay, I haven't got this library now, so I want to add it to the REPL. But this machine is remote to me, so I can't even. Well, of course, I could log into it, but that's not what you want. So, but of course, it's a dangerous thing as well. You can load anything you want, I guess, to some extent as well. But you have to trust people, anyway. And everything has to be. The whole idea of a lot of these things is, if they're playthings, then they should be disposable and burnable, and no one should worry about them. But obviously, for development. What should we say? Development affordances. These kind of things are great. Eventually, you probably do want to get rid of that in production. You probably want to turn it off. But
it does come in Wedge. Just to be clear, in case anyone panics, it is a dev only dependency. Is the tools namespace stuff? Not tools namespace. But I'm just going to keep bringing it up now. Tools steps alpha stuff.
But the other thing that we're interested in doing, and this is not really, it's a sort of similar concept, is that you can put Clojure into databases and set, come on, hear me out.
There you go.
No, I was actually going to say, have you talked to Malcolm about this? You should bring him back on because.
All right, okay. No, that's the thing. So you put Clojure into a database, and then what you want to do is you want to, very much like the blockchain type of thing. You want to say, okay, particular contracts execute at particular times. So you want to be able to version these bits of information, but keep it keep it in your database, because that's a nice way of versioning things. Whereas, it's got immutable data. Git is a pain in the ass to deal with in the Clojure world. Things like Crux and Datomic are very nice for that. It's all very, you have the same set of rules, but in fact, you want a particular version of it. It's really easy to make that kind of facility available for yourself, and then you can just load it in, evaluate it, and off you go.
Yeah. I know
and then add specs to it.
On that.
Say it again, VJ.
And then add specs to it.
Well, you do want that, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So it's keep the database busy, Why is it not doing anything? Oh, let's give it some specs, and I'll just let it validate some shit. So yeah, I'm paying for this computing power.
So anyway, spoiler alert that the Cruxes of people are working on that.
Well, I don't know if it's going to be part of Crux, but I think Malcolm gave a talk about the Holy Trinity, like data code or something like that, which was based on this idea of like putting code into your database, because code is data and blah 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 blah.
It's really funny. I mean, we go back to like another cycle of PL SQL, stored procs, back to square one. But this time it's got to be different. Like, yes, that's true. Because it's Clojure,
Yeah. Well, you can already run Clojure inside Postgres.
Yeah.
Using the Java stuff, so it's already possible. The novelty of things like Crux or even Kafka Streams is that they allow the data processing to happen inside your application rather than outside it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that actually jives very well with your vision, Ray, because the whole with Crux, I can already deploy code into it, right? Like my code and the database lives together. So I don't know if I need to put it in the database necessarily. Obviously, there's versioning concerns there, so there's other aspects to that. But who breaks functions anyway? I just add 2 to the end and start a new one.
Yeah. I think isn't it the same in CouchDB as well?
From an
right?
audit perspective, it's quite nice to have these bits of code that have been signed and all these kind of things, and you can do that. To some extent, you've got more control over how you like the provenance of code on GitHub is kind of tricky to really program yourself. Whereas if you want to control the provenance of your own code, if you have your own mechanisms for doing that, it's nice to put it in a database. Actually, I think
the prerequisite to making this stuff work will be shimming out Git, so building a Git remote, which is your database. Because until you have that, I think that you're in you've got to build out Git again, and teach people to use it, and decide whether you want to make a nicer interface over Git, or if you want to mimic the old one that people already know, right? Like there's a whole marketing thing there that you have to worry about.
You don't want to use, to me, I don't want to use Git, and I don't want to have anything to do with Git, because Git is about distributed development. It's not about storing source code somewhere. I think those two things are orthogonal,
But what do you mean by distributed development? Sharing Word documents?
That would be a form of distributed development.
Because
I don't think anyone's suggesting that, but yeah, it's a form of distributed development. You could try it. I think people already did that. It didn't work very well.
But without the code, I don't see Git is still at its core is just like a database, right? It's a data storage engine, and that's it. And then the whole
well, the way I think of Git is it's just a sort of yes, it's a database, but really it's a kind of data structure. It's a sort of hierarchical hashing system based on top of a file system, and then all you're really doing is just putting diffs at each level of that. Wherever you find a non-matching point in the hierarchy, you're just putting diffs on it. Mm-hmm. It's pretty trivial, actually. So I really, the basis of it is pretty trivial.
Until somebody does it, it's always.
I really do believe that, and I really think that it's a total fuck up Git. I really do. I think it's overblown. It's mental. And it doesn't solve half the problems it pretends to solve as well. It can't do auto merging, and it can't do half these things it can't do that aren't obviously trivial. That aren't just well understood bits of math. So, and it's got its user interface is unbelievably shit as well, as we all know. So no, I'm not. I get the point of it, and I know why it's popular, etc. Blah blah blah. But I don't think that's the end of the world.
I think that is something that we're talking about. Like, Jack's saying, this is our blessed framework, and then people using it. And then Linus is like, this is what I built for myself. Go fuck yourself. And then everybody's like, yay, we're going to use this thing. Like, okay.
Well, I mean,
he said, this is
enough,
my problem and I'm solving it for myself. That's what he said. He never intended that this is going to be like everybody will switch to Git and then complain to him.
GitHub played a big role in Git's adoption, right? So it's sort of that, it got commoditized, right? It became a commercial thing.
Yeah.
I think. Well, the thing about GitHub is that it changed the user experience. That's. I mean, it was unusable, and GitHub made it usable.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really. I'm not joking about that. That's a fact. And that's the source of complaint these days. With the people from SourceHut and the people from Microsoft who want to get rid of email and stuff like this.
Yeah, I think
let's go into a little sort of
exactly.
Because, we talk about SourceHut now. We can talk about
exactly.
We've all paid our money.
We're not getting paid, but we paid our money. So let's let's talk to other people and then make them use this service.
So me and VJ went to a Birds of a Feather session with Drew.
At FOSDEM.
At the
FOSDEM in Belgium.
At the FOSDEM, a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And I got SourceHut stickers.
Nice.
Their logo is a circle, but
yeah. I mean, it was a totally shit meetup, to be honest. He was dominated by this absolute asshole. He just wanted to ask them, trolling questions. But he was very nice, Drew, and very, actually very affable, and managed it very well. And his vision is pretty awesome, I think. He's obviously SourceHut is a piece of crap at the moment in that way. It looks horrible, but it's what does he call it? A brutal interface.
Minimalist or brutal. Yeah.
I think he calls it brutalist.
Yeah.
I think there's a tendency to conflate like shiny buttons with a nice interface, though, and any exactly. So like there are usability problems on SourceHut. I'm not going to pretend there aren't, but there's actually less than on GitHub. Like, I have so many frustrations with the GitHub pull request review UI. Like I press a button and then it takes 10 seconds and then bumps me back to the last page I was on. It's just like, no, I wanted to leave more comments. Why are you doing this to me?
I don't know how to start reviews and make reviews. All these review things are horrible in GitHub. And also we can go on forever about reviews in GitHub. Let's not do that.
It's one of those interesting things, though, where if I was to take like a Justin Jackson approach to it, who's this bootstrapper guy, and he always says, well, what are people doing about it, right? If there's a market there, what are people doing about it? Nothing. People are seemingly very happy about GitHub, right? They're not trying to work around the review system. So that tells us something about either how often reviews are happening or how deep reviews are. And it tells us something about like how much people actually care about this problem. They've obviously got bigger problems that are bothering them.
Yeah, I mean, if you see that most of the software is like that, right? I mean, if it's solving 20-25% of the problems that are bothering you at that moment, people just jump onto that thing, and it's not like nobody thinks ahead, and forget about all the fluffy stuff like freedom and open source and this shit. Nobody gives a shit about that stuff. It's all just lip service. So I think if it is solving 20% of the current problems, so just switch to that one, and that's how Jira became like a big deal. And fucking everywhere. And it's even
Jira
used
solves everyone's problem, so it solves nobody's problem. That's the problem with Jira, right? It's like it solves marketing's problem, it solves sales's problem, right? Like before you can fill out a fucking ticket, you have to fill out 20 fields in your Jira, and you don't know what half of them mean. It's like, well, what impact will this have on the marketing side? Oh, I don't know. It's your feature.
I think every what impact does it have? Every drop down should have, it will burn it down, and then you select that. It will burn shit down, like everything.
I worked for a bank once as part of Jux, and like whenever we made a release out, we had to say what the impact would be, and one of the options was it will cause downtime. I was like, nobody's going to tick that box. Like, who would say, my application is going to break everything? It's going to be fine.
It's like visa application. Exactly. It's like a visa application. Are you a terrorist? Yes, I am.
I'm not.
It's like almost they're gonna oh shit, should I click yes here?
Here, VJ, I filled this in for you.
Anyway, but yeah, I mean that's the shitty part with different types of software these days. Anyway, but yeah, I mean SourceSet is really, I think it's simple. It has all
Yeah.
the modules that we need. I've been using it for all of my private shit, and I keep using these builds and playing with that stuff. And
Mm.
I like that you can also use Mercurial, which has a bit more better UI.
Yeah.
I used to use Mercurial a lot when I was using still Joel Spolsky's company. They
Fogbugs.
started some Fogbugs. Yeah, I had Fogbugs account, and that and Kiln was
Yeah,
the
they were
thing.
Mercurial. Yeah.
Yeah, Mercurial by default, so I was using that one. But then I think it became slower and slower because Python. So and then I think
So
Git got the less is worse sort of shit. Yeah.
it was also faster by default. Mercurial has gone through a lot of performance improvements over the years,
Yeah.
especially with Facebook adopting it. They contributed a
Mm.
lot of patches in that area.
Yeah.
And Git is starting to improve its UI as well. We've got things like the switch command
Yes,
now
that's the new
and
one.
stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So they are paying attention. It's just that the all the Git commands right now they're basically commands that control the internal data structure. Like you have to understand the internals of Git to know
Yes.
exactly what they do.
Yeah.
Right? That's what they are.
Yeah.
There isn't really an abstraction there. So now they're starting to build up an abstraction on top of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing that like bothers me every time I try to explain something for a couple of folks who are new to Git. I need to tell them, oh, can you please squash it? Like, okay, what the fuck is this? And then, oh, so I can type git squash? Like, no, you need to type git rebase interactive and then, take the head and then 4 commits and holy shit. Like, I mean, all this junk that I'm carrying in my brain, now I need to fill that into their brains.
That's a really good way to describe wedge and edge, right? It's
Yeah.
like that's
Yeah.
the junk, right? Like it's this kind of junk, right? It's like we're collecting it as a community, right? And like I haven't done this yet, but I want to go raid. I shouldn't describe it as raiding. That sounds a bit aggressive. But I want to go look through the Luminous code and like find these hacks and like collect them. I want to like just put them in jars and like, line them up. And they're my hacks now.
Yeah. I think
Not
that's
your
the
hacks
thing.
are mine.
That all your hacks belong to us now. Nice. So what stage is Wedge in right now? Is it like production ready, enterprise class, adopt, ThoughtWorks?
Pre-alpha.
Fully certified.
Fully certified, yeah. ISO level.
ISO 9001.
It's been IETF standard, actually. There's an RFC in place.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an RFC, absolutely.
So there is going to be wedge certified consultants, and then there is going to be wedge certifications. And
well, I was
it's been in draft since 1943, but
no, it's pre-alpha is probably the best way to describe it. Like this morning, I made a change to the API that, well, as a user, you probably won't notice API changes too much. I think the user interface is fairly stable at this point. Mm-hmm. But it's for building tooling on top of Wedge. So like this morning, one of the changes I made was that part of the API contract, sort of like a protocol, but protocols don't quite do what I want them to do. So I actually just load a file. But and just you can load whatever functions you want as long as 3 of them are there and the rest is like total free for all. But instead of requiring system config as a function, I now require.
I'm sure James
config.
Reeves has something to say to you about that.
Yeah. Hey, under the hood, require users loads. So like, it's all kosher, right? Like it's all fine, right? It's just don't worry about it. Here's the thing: I use it so that to allow for the differences in different system libraries to emphasize themselves. So when you're like developing with Integrant, you want to use Integrant terms like halt or go or stop or whatever. When you work with Clip, like there's no suspend function. So I did start this by like making a protocol, and then every system library added like 2 or 3 functions to that protocol. I was like, this is silly, right? There is no concept of suspend in Clip. There is no concept of suspend in mount. Like, why am I adding it just because Integrant has it? So I used the load capabilities to allow it to, you say, I want Integrant, and then it just loads a file which brings in all the Integrant stuff, and to make it transparent so that you can just refer it indirectly rather than having to go to some other namespace and refer it. I use load.
Transparency is better.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes the experience better for the user, and that's as long as it's reliable. That's all that matters.
Yeah. So just so I understand, then, I mean, it's a web thing, but like one of the things that the problem with the web is that it's everything, you know. So it's like it's like saying, oh yeah, it's like a building.
Wedge has nothing to do with the web. It has even less stuff in it than I should not tap the desk. It has even less stuff in it than Edge. I've actually outsourced the responsibility of stacks to templates, which means that so I am going to build the first version of Juxt Wedge, but I'm trying to get some Juxter to take it over and say, like, this is your responsibility now. I have nothing to do with this anymore. It's yours.
But okay, just so I understand then. So if it's not a web framework and it's not what is it? You know, so,
well,
what project? What sort of like where do you know like? Why would I go to it? What problem am I trying to solve that I'm going to say, yes, I need Wedge for this?
Anywhere that you would probably start a system, like using component or integrant or your own hand-rolled system, Ray.
So I wouldn't bother then.
Yeah,
okay.
No. Anywhere you choose those things, you would use Wedge.
I would not bother then. Okay, so it's not for me. Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Well, I think you would benefit from hooking up your thing to Wedge because you'd get all the, you get the TNS fixes and the cider. Oh no, you don't use cider. That's not a sales pitch.
We have no Emacs. We have no reloading. It's fine.
Well, I also generate dev files for VS Code as well and things like that. I've been trying to generate them for the other tools, but like surprisingly, Atom doesn't have a way to have per directory config files, which surprised me. So I tried to get Chlorine generated as well, but I couldn't. And Vim is just a total free-for-all, so there's no chance of getting any standardized config there.
So you just need to switch to VS Code to use Wedge.
No, I use it with Vim.
Okay, so the idea is that it's some sort of like let's say lubricant around the component type systems where you want to be able to choose something freely around those areas. Yeah.
Or here's the sort of elevator pitch. You specify, I want to have an integrant system loaded from an aero config, and Wedge will give you a main that can start that automatically, so you don't have to write and maintain your own main anymore. It'll give you a full dev system with all the latest and greatest of the dev system. It'll give you a way to load stuff up for beginners, and it will fix any common bugs that happen in a centralized place. Like that is the sales pitch, basically.
Yeah.
Nice.
But then I intend to encourage companies to build stacks on. Right. So one friction to starting your own template is that you would have to collect up these hacks, and that people are going to report things from esoteric environments that you don't want to support. Right. Juxt only use Linux. Right. They don't support officially internally anything else. For Edge, we did support Mac and Windows. That was because we wanted to do training on it. But, there's stuff I'm not going to get it running on Sun or maybe not on BSD, right? Like you just don't want to support that stuff. But the idea is that if there's something like weird that you have to do, that would end up in Wedge, right?
Yeah.
So that's the idea, is to sort of collect up anything that would, one of the things that would be a friction to maintaining your own stack. Why don't we just put those in Wedge, not Edge?
So my characterization of a lubricant is quite good then.
Yeah, it is. It's just like a small exchange. Like you say you want this, and you get these things in exchange.
Malcolm and Co can have it as WD-40, so it's 4 letters.
Well, I think what will happen, because I no longer maintain Edge, right? So that's Jux's responsibility now. If they want to break it or turn it into a template, whatever. But at the least, they can build it on top of Wedge, so I know that I won't have to get messages from. It's always Lucio.
Okay.
I'm going to name him out, right? He always ends up on these projects with these sucky situations where he's like, "How do I fix this bug again? Don't have this problem in Edge." I'm like, "You do this, and you just copy this code from Edge here, and copy that bit there, and fiddle with it a bit." I can stop getting messages from Lucio. So
right.
So any other projects that you're working on?
Just before we go on to other projects, right? So are you saying that in terms of if I want to add things on top of this library, this Wedge, so how do I do it and maintain sort of upgradability?
Well, for the most part, so it depends what you want to tweak. So for the most part, you won't be fiddling with stuff. The only sort of real like fiddle point is the system code. So if you want to develop which is something you would want to do, right? You don't like integrant or component. You have your own thing. I don't know what you do. You like def stuff in a namespace or something, like a madman. But you have like whatever your process is, right? So you would want to define your own system. So to do that, you implement four functions. A function called config, which let's say you're doing a defs in a namespace, maybe you would read from an environment, or maybe you would just return nil, right? Maybe there's no way to configure your system. You return a start function, which starts your system based on the config and any options that were passed in. A stop function, which stops the started system, and a load dev function. So you implement these four things, and then Wedge is able to provide you the dev system, the main, and stuff like that.
So I might actually be able to use it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. No, yeah, definitely. I would I haven't tested it out yet and figured out how unergonomic it is, but hypothetically, yes, it should be like something you could feasibly do. So far, I've only done Aero and Clip and Aero and Integrant as combined pairs because
we're thinking about using Mali for our configuration.
Mali? I would call it Mali. That's the problem of being on the internet, right? It's sort of like I say it how it sounds.
I would call it Mali.
Do they actually have a
format? Because that's the word for jasmine in my language, in my native language. So it sounds similar to Mali, and then sounds okay. Yeah.
So
I don't know how Tommy pronounces it, to be honest.
No.
I think every project should have remember when the Linux audio configuration, like this is Linux Torvalds, and I announced Linux as Linux or something. Like everybody used to use that to test Linux. So I think every project should have like a audio file that says how to pronounce this shit.
And I still can't pronounce his name, but you know how Peter Paternosaurus has that on his readmes, doesn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Peter I actually met him at the Clojure trail last year, and he's one of the most handsome men in person. In person, he's a very handsome man. Yeah, very dashing as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
very erudite. Okay. He's very sort of well dressed and well groomed, and yeah, very nice, and obviously a lovely bloke. So yeah. Anyway, carry on. Yeah.
I can't even remember what I was talking about now.
We're talking about
Mali.
How do you use
Mali and Mali?
How do you use Mali as a config system? Because it's just for validating stuff, right? You got to give it something in the first place.
Yeah, but you just make up some stuff,
right?
That you can put in coordinates, like where things live,
Oh, I see. So it's for validating your config. So do you read like an Eden file or something? Do you?
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So you have some config, and but the thing about it is that the thing that we want is something which is like very optional and programmable, and something that works in dev and CI and all these other things. And we want it to be kind of like flexible. And everything we've tried so far is like fits one case but not the other case.
People have forever been trying to find the one true way to model their domain, and they keep failing, right? This is my experience in Django.
Exactly. But we have to keep trying, and that's where we get the don't give up. That's.
No, I'm a negative Nelly. It's just not possible. Just give up.
Okay.
just give up.
People keep on trying. You shouldn't fucking bother.
Well, we've had so many attempts at this point.
Really clever people have tried. Why are you bothering? That's the most common criticism against me.
No, I think Mali's really cool, and they've come at it from a very pragmatic standpoint. So I've watched all of their complaints against Spec 1, and all the things they've tried to make Spec do that it doesn't do, and they've made those work under Mali. So they've been very pragmatic about a common set of use cases. So I think that while it probably won't allow you to model the whole world, it will allow you to model perhaps 90% of it that's sufficiently good.
Yeah, I think a decent portion will do us. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there is the other approach. Val Weaselneck has a wonderful blog post where he talks about how he put his domain model into a DataScript database. And then whenever he needed it in a new format, like SQL or for a schema or whatever, he would actually query it out of the database and query like transitively and use rules to infer things automatically, which I thought was really a fascinating way of doing it.
Yeah, no, it's good. No, he's got some awesome stuff, that lad.
So the solution to everything is put shit in the database.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
And make sure that all of your names have underscores as well, which is a Val's other sort of countercultural. He's a real iconoclast in the naming space. Val.
I've been saying the same thing for years, though. It's just like the grepability is so valuable, and I think there's perhaps a bit of a clash that I saw in the comments on that article, which was people who clearly work on like servicey oriented architectures where they like this is not a reality for them anyway. It's just not possible. Like they can't grep for anything. They have to grep source in their home directory. And people who have, I was about to paint them in a more flattering light than I should because I'm one of them. But people who work on on an application that they have coerced to live in, or some people. No, I think what it is when you don't work in a big corporate environment and you realize at some point in your life that, hey, Postgres is really fast. Like you don't need to build out like a full, and you can use Postgres for a lot of stuff. You can use it as actually a very fast job queue. You can use it as a pub subsystem. It's got plenty of uses. Why would I set up 5 databases, Redis, Memcached, Dynamo, to do 10 different jobs when I could just use Postgres for 90% of it and put it all in one repo? So you can scale very, very far. So the people who do that, they like being able to grep the same repo. They like this sort of, by having it local, they get all these shortcuts and they start to rely on them. The fact they can grep for it.
Yeah. I think that's it's a shortcut, right? I mean, I want a key value system, so let's use Redis instead of paying any attention to design or deployment problems or everything.
I think the argument of Val, which I think is probably the killer argument, is that if you use these kind of like kebab style things, then you're kind of on an island. Because that's what Clojure likes, but it's what no one else likes. So if you are on an island, and I mean we pretty much are, to be honest, we're pretty much on an island, so we can live the island life, but he's got a killer point, which is that most people are not on an island, and if you're not on an island, you're actually paying a high price for that small luxury of having kebab names, when in fact having everything as underscore, you would gain a lot at the margins when you're externalizing your systems, and then having it everywhere makes it more idiomatic for you, and then you can win everywhere.
Yeah,
you delete.
But it is definitely it's definitely a kind of like a gulp moment. It's swallow hard. It's like, oh shit, okay, fuck it, I'll do it.
Well, I think part of the problem is the phrasing, right? People don't see, they see like, oh, kebab case is the Clojure way. Well, no, because like symbols and keywords, they can have underscores in them, right? Like it's part of the spec. It was always. I actually see it as the feature that you can represent, camel, kebab, and snake case, all of them in Clojure symbols. It's a feature. Come on,
but who has time to press shift? I remember when I was
first asking.
No one has time to press shift. That's too much fucking work.
I remember asking a question. I don't know if it was on Stack Overflow or Slack, actually. I think it might have been Stack Overflow. But I asked a question, and I was coming from a Java background. I ended up having, camel casing something in Clojure. And some bloke said on the Slack, I'm pretty sure it was not on Slack, on Stack Overflow, yeah, this is the answer. But by the way, don't do that because they'll all laugh at you. and I think he's kind of right, it's a kind of cultural thing, but
well, I guess it depends in the circles you hang out with, right? You obviously hang out with very rude people.
But in other languages, I think it's also the other languages, there is a syntactical restriction, right? You cannot do this kind of shit. So in Clojure, we have the freedom to I don't know, kebab case, snake case, camel case, I don't know, hot shit case, whatever that we want to use.
Exactly.
But I think let's not be wrong though. I mean, I think the default is kebab case everywhere.
Oh yeah,
so,
that's true.
There's no point in arguing that is the culture is what the culture is.
Yeah.
But but I like the fact that someone can pipe up and get some kind of like support for saying, yeah, maybe the culture's wrong.
Yeah.
It's got some defects. It's got some defects even. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's get back to the other libraries that are projects that you're working on. Anything that you want to highlight?
Well, I was actually going to ask you, what do you want to talk about, right? I don't know what's interesting. It's all interesting to me.
Right. I think we've had enough. We're an hour and a half in. Let's stop. I think VJ wants to ask you a very important question now, but
well, we did already.
Oh, we did. Oh, we covered it. Okay. Oh, yeah. It wasn't the answer you were looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, but what type of some other shit, by the way? So, what do you use in your day-to-day thing?
I use Vim hooked up to Cider.
Okay.
So, not a lot of people know this, but Cider is split into a Clojure part as well, and Calva, Vim Fireplace, Vim's Clojure plugin as well, and obviously Cider itself, cider.l, all use the same common backend. So I'm a contributor to that. I have actually, for my sins, I did make a contribution to cider.l in Vim. Well, doing it in Emacs was harder because I don't have like Predit set up in Emacs. Like I don't know how to Predit in Emacs, but I know how to do the equivalent in Vim. So it was actually like safer for me to make the because I'm not going to run it. I just made the change. I was like, I just need to delete a flag so that it wasn't marked as safe anymore.
Yeah,
or unsafe. I marked it as safe. So like I'm part of the ecosystem. I'm supportive of Emacs. My stance is strongly that you should use what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I think the nice part Cider is doing is becoming LSP sort of way, right? So
yeah,
you get all the features in all the editors, not just one specific
exactly.
thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's
the Orchard aspect is really good as well because then you can just take the libraries as a tool builder. So it's pretty epic. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Bujadar has done great work there stewarding that one.
Yeah. That's true.
The thing, maybe is the last thing that we should talk about, Dom, actually, is something that me and you started to talk about at the event in Leuven, actually, in Belgium.
Packaging.
Which was about jars. And because, I'm a jar hater.
Same.
And, just like I'm a sort of, component system hater. No, but I'm joking about all these things, by the way. I'm just sort of, not a great fan, but I don't really judge harshly people who use them. But I'm not a fan of the jar, only in the sense that, like I see above, I'm a big fan of running things dynamically in the spirit of like Clojure and Lisp. So jars to me always seem like they're snapping things off and like, it's handy for certain distribution cases, but really just run the damn thing from the source code. What's the point, So you have something, I think, which does distributions, which is sort of just enough of a jar. I think you said that was your pitch to me.
Yeah.
What's that thing again?
Pack. So Pack tries to be a little bit unique in that it doesn't actually compile an uber jar in the same way that Leiningen does. So what Leiningen does is it sort of tries to find all the files. So there's this thing called the class path, which is a list of places to check for things. So when you actually set up a source folder, you're actually adding the source folder to your class path. So what Leiningen does is it collects everything up on the class path and just smushes it together into one jar. Now, this results in some very horrible code internally and like actually broken behavior in a couple of cases. So for example, if you have multiple data readers on the class path, Clojure's behavior when it finds duplicate keys in them, right? So if you've got, I don't know, db/id defined twice, it's actually to throw an error and stop the REPL from starting at all. Leiningen will just silently merge them together. And that's before I even point at Leiningen's. I'm very good at being downers on everyone. Meow. Right? I start every project by crucifying someone else's. That's just the... The other thing, like Leiningen has a horrible.
I think that's just a plugin, though. In fairness, Leiningen is not crucified completely.
No. Well, there's two other things it does that drives me nuts. One is that it has code in it for merging XML files, like arbitrary XML files it finds. It's like, we'll try and merge these things. Like they might look vaguely the same at the end. We'll just smush them together. Like,
hey, if you don't have a schema, it doesn't matter. As long as you have one root element, so fuck it, you can merge everything in XML.
The code is quite horrible. Like it's surprisingly like I just sort of looked at it. I was like, I need to build a jar solution for depth studied, but I'm not copying that. That's just no.
Yeah.
And bless Sean Caulfield's soul for doing that with Depstar. Like he has taken on that sort of Uberjar solution, and bless him.
Well, I think there's still a few things that are like, don't know what to do with this, don't know what to do with this, don't know what to do with this.
Yeah. Well, licenses is a really good example. Legally, under the Apache license, you have to retain the license. But Linigan just has a regex in it that says, "Oh, if it matches license, and just ignore it." Like, well, no, you just so if you build your jar with Linigan, you're actually violating the Apache license. So hypothetically, you could get in trouble for that, right? I was like, once I knew this, I felt responsible. I find bugs in everything, right? Like that's just I love Kyle Kingsbury's thing where he's like, I seem to attract bugs in computers, so I've made a career out of it, right?
Yeah. So, counting up to 10 is a problem for computers.
Yeah.
So where are you at the pack? So is there an RFC for pack already?
Well, what I did with pack is I went on a research adventure into Javaland, and I found that actually people have solved the Uberjar problem in different ways. So they actually they've built special class loaders that can load jars from inside another jar. So the result of that is that pack is really fast because Linigan has to like unzip a bunch of jars and then recompress them back into one. I just have to like put compressed stuff already into a compressed container. Like there's no compression happening, so it just doesn't. It's super fast.
Yeah.
But so what I do is pack is a wrapper. Well, pack does a couple of things. So if you're using Docker, for example, we don't need to bother with all this Uberjar stuff. I just take all of the libraries that you're using, stick them inside the Docker container. So pack can actually generate directly a Docker container or a tar.gz for import into Docker. It can even, I think, upload it to Google automatically for you. If you have a Docker registry, it can actually just push it straight to the registry. Mm-hmm. So we don't even need to bother with that Uberjar stuff. So I will preserve the class path in earnest. So we don't have to merge any files together.
Yeah.
If you're uploading to AWS Lambda, then they actually take a zip file containing a lib file, a lib folder with jars in. So I just, if you have any Git dependencies, I turn them into jars and then I put them in a zip folder and upload it. So that there's no problem. When you want something a bit more Uberjar-like, I use one of these funky class loaders, which will pull out jars from inside jars.
Yeah.
So you don't have this sort of, you don't have to worry about how do I merge together these things, because the responsibility of merging things together is actually on the library that wants to consume those things. So Clojure has defined behavior for what happens if you have multiple copies of a namespace on the class path. It uses the first one, period. Yeah. If you have multiple data readers.clj on the class path, it merges them together in a particular way. It's not just merge, it's like merge with, if there's a conflict, blow up. And it's the same.
But I think, didn't Alex do a talk about this recently, about what he does with versions, like the Maven type versions as well, that are slightly different?
Was it at the Clojure Tray, the keynote?
Yeah, he also gave a talk at, was it in Bratislava? One of the Clojure Europe thing before it was finished. Where he talked about the algorithm. Yeah, so that's really about which jar you pick. So that's about picking the latest and making sure you don't have conflicting versions of the same artifact. But hypothetically, I mean, I've seen this in the wild because I've contributed to CLJDoc a little bit. There was, I don't know if Oz still does this, but there were versions of Oz that included Cheshire. He just bundled the Cheshire source code as part of Oz, which meant that if you then depended on Oz, you would get not necessarily the version of Cheshire you thought you were getting. And Cheshire's built on top of Jackson, which is like infamously sensitive to this sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
So you would have all sorts of like weird shit going on and head scratching. It was because Oz was bringing in its own copies of Cheshire and Jackson. So that's what deps.eden takes care of. What Pack's really doing is, well, Pack's handling Pack is not having a decision about what happens when you have two copies of Cheshire on the class path. Clojure is responsible for that, right?
Yeah.
Rather than Linigan being responsible, or Depstar, or Boot, or whatever.
Yeah. This is really good. I think I never got to this point of the conversation with you because now I'm interested. Yeah. I think we were just discussing problems, and we end up going our separate ways. But yeah, this is good. Yeah.
So
I like the idea of, like you say, going out there and finding out who solved the problem and just bringing it in. That's really good.
Yeah, I try and, if there's anything I could impart onto it, I guess this is the wrong podcast for imparting some wisdom towards the end, but I'll do it anyway.
That's very true.
look at prior art. There's so much prior art and good stuff to copy out there. Like just go and investigate before you sort of jump on a solution. It's so often there's just like a very easy solution that someone else has already done the hard thinking for. Or nudge Alex Miller and Mikhail and other people on Slack to get them to do the hard work for you. It is wonderful too.
Always delegate.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's just...
Either to the past or to the future. Never do anything in the present.
Exactly.
You've got a wonderful career in management ahead of you.
Nice. So I think on that bombshell, go and check out Wedge and pack your wedges. I think that's it from us for wow. That's a 1 hour 40 minutes. Hopefully we'll remove racetrack and my track, so it will be much thinner by by eliminating the redundant shit from the podcast. It will pack very tightly. Exactly. to load it faster, and makes it better. So that's it from us for today. Thank you, Dominic, for joining us and imparting your little bit of wisdom and mostly complaining about other shit. And
yes. Meow. Meow, meow,
meow. Funnily enough, we've all got dogs, but we ended up being quite a catty program.
That's true.
Well, barking down a microphone causes clipping. It's just horrible. So meow.
So cats are more podcast friendly.
Yeah, they're more microphone friendly. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Anyway.
But just a final word there, Dominic. I mean, it is really nice to to talk to you and to hear from you, because you are someone that's fresh in the community, and it's nice to have people like yourself. I think your age group, like people like Val and people like
10
that.
to 15.
Yeah, 10 to 15.
Barely legal, let's call you.
Who's playing Among Us.
Then it's nice to hear from people of a younger age group and who's got good ideas, bringing something new to the programming culture and to the Clojure community. So yeah, keep going.
And obviously, we're here to tell you that don't do that because you'll be laughed at, just like what Ray heard when he said not to use the kebab case.
Oh shit! You look like you just knocked your laptop over or something.
Yes.
He's gone nuts.
Anyway. Yeah, I mean, I think, in all seriousness, I agree with Ray. I think the newer ideas coming into the community is the most important thing, like fresh look at the things.
Yeah.
Because
we didn't even get to my plans for world domination yet.
That's true.
I've got wedge is just the beginning.
Back,
I actually have a full roadmap for I am going to tackle the web framework problem at some point, right? Like I have a plan, I have notes in place, but it's like wedge is at the bottom, and then I need a database in place. So I think I'm going to make Redis my primary database, and then I'm going to have a web framework that does stuff. It's like Yada. I can't
Let's
call it
talk
Yada
about
2
Redis offline then, because you shouldn't do that. Okay.
Cool. On that bombshell, we end episode number 666 with Dominic. And
the silent 6.
Yes. The 6 is silent. So thank you, Dominic.
Titles
thanks.
There.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show.
666 with Dominic.
Okay, we should stop demonizing Dominic.
All right, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and go check out Wedge on Source Hut. We'll post the links to the stuff in the show notes, and follow him on Twitter.
Links,
yeah, we're really good at posting links. If we can't figure the shit out, then please write to us in writing.
VJ at DevNull works perfectly.
PO Box number 666, somewhere in Europe. Defen. I mean, everybody knows me in Europe, so it's pretty easy. Anyway, thank you. And I hope the people who are listening, you guys are staying safe. And we wish to bring you a couple of more episodes before this year finishes, which seems to be running forever. And then good luck out there with the stuff.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Defan. And the awesome vegetarian music or the track is Melon Hamburger by Pizzeri. And the show's audio is mixed by Wouter Dullert. I'm pretty sure I butchered his name. Maybe you should insert your own name here, Dullert.
Wouter.
If you'd like to support us, please do check out our Patreon page, and you can show your appreciation to all the hard work or the lack of hard work that we're doing. And you can also catch up with either Ray, with me, for some unexplainable reason. You want to interact with us, then do check us out on Slack, Clojure Slack or Clojureverse, or on Zulip, or just at us at Defan Podcast on Twitter. Enjoy your day and see you in the next episode. I think this will resonate with the younger generation, right? Oh, these guys are different, talking about Among Us, and so finally that demographic is covered. 10 to 15 age range, people who are trying Clojure for the first time. So
well, now I know what the age range is, and Ray said I was in that age range. I felt a bit uncomfortable in 10 to 15. You've misjudged that slightly, Ray.